So Nebraska voted overwhelmingly for Donald Trump. They didn't vote for him once. They voted for him time and time and time again. They felt that they were making a wise decision, but it turns out that this was probably the worst decision they could have ever made. The nuts and bolts, the core of their economy, the agriculture industry, is absolutely being annihilated as a result of their vote.
Right now, Nebraska has all sorts of challenges are cropping up for Nebraska farmers. The Nebraska Farmers Union says producers are facing the toughest time in decades.
Their costs are rising, but commodity prices are falling, meaning they can't really turn a profit, and that's hurting the rest of the state's economy. Channel 8's Jake Holman joins us live after talking with a local farmer. Jake, what'd you find out?
Yeah, Rod, Sophia, the GDP numbers for the first quarter of 2025, which is another tool, a measurement to estimate the size of the economy. It does not paint a pretty picture for the state of Nebraska here, and in large part because of the largest industry, which is agriculture. Now, tonight we hear how one farmer is coping with these challenges.
With the interest rates where they are right now, it's putting everybody into a bind.
Bill Landon is one of the many farmers in Nebraska who's in a tight spot financially. According to a report from the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis, Nebraska's gross domestic product fell more than 6% in the first quarter, tied with Iowa for the largest decrease in the nation. And it's because of losses in agriculture.
Now, you remember Don Bacon, the Republican from Nebraska? He's even saying the quiet part aloud. Nebraska's in trouble, and it owes a lot to the tariff policy and all the bullshit that Donald Trump has enacted on that state. So, Don, my man, don't be surprised when everyone told you, just like your MAGA cohorts in your state, everyone told you that this was going to be the case, but yet you failed to listen. My mother would always say, and I think she was a genius, she would always say, if you lie down with dogs, you will get fleas. Well, Nebraska, you laid down with Donald Trump. You laid down with Donald Trump, knowing what his policies were, knowing his Project 2025 tendencies, and you now have fleas. In reality, this is not about red or blue. This is about business, the business of politics. And I believe that there is a nefarious plan to take family farms. And I'm talking about family farms. And it is based on causing them to go bankrupt, coming in with the hedge funds, and buying at a fire sale price. So, Nebraska, you got exactly what you voted for.
Welcome back to Sparkle's show. I hope you're well and taking care of yourselves. Today, we're digging into a growing story that's been quietly unraveling in the heart of America, the economic and political crisis in Nebraska. Now, if you've been following the headlines or some recent viral TikToks, you might have seen stories about Nebraska's agriculture sector being in freefall. Farmers facing some of the worst conditions in decades, a state economy contracting faster than almost anywhere else in the country, and behind it all, a deeply political conversation that's prompting some serious soul-searching. Let's walk through this, carefully, factually, and with nuance.
So the news out of Nebraska just keeps getting worse every day. I got a lot of responses to my video yesterday about how all the farmers are going bankrupt and how Governor Pillen requested for a bailout for our state. Well, it ends up that they're not going to grant the bailout to help us. So after we all voted red and elected all these people, they're not going to do anything to help us. And I learned a lot yesterday from all the comments on my video. It seems like a lot of the blue states, especially California, are actually the ones subsidizing and keeping some of us red states alive that are falling by the wayside. Which is weird because I've always heard bad things about California, but yeah, it turns out that they have an $80 billion surplus every year that they pay into the United States, and all of us welfare states like Nebraska actually benefit from California doing so well. And they're just a blue state. They're just solid blue. And they do better than all of the other states, especially Nebraska. So I'm starting to rethink everything I've been told in my life.
Happens after the first one falls. Well, the state of Nebraska, the governor, Jim Pillen, has asked the federal government for help because they're not going to be able to pay their bills this year. And here's the problem in Nebraska. They had over a $2 billion contract with the Chinese government to export soybeans to China. Well, out of that $2 billion, they've canceled all the contracts. So out of that $2 billion, $350 million was state revenue taxes. They're not getting any of that. And the governor also goes on to say that because the migrant farmers weren't able to work in Nebraska this summer, that those people didn't pay their taxes either. And the farmers who already have crops in the ground, folks, they've already spent their money. They're going to need help too because they're not getting any money from the contracts anymore. So Nebraska is the first state. And when you look at the Midwest, you're probably looking at Kansas, you're looking at Iowa, South Dakota, all of those places that are large exporters of grains to China and depend on migrant farm labor. They're not going to be able to pay their bills either. So here's the first one.
Maybe y'all saw the news out of Nebraska today. Our state has, in fact, gone bankrupt. Due to his tariffs and the loss of all of our migrant farm workers, our state has lost over $500 million. It's so bad that Governor Pillen had to call and ask him for a bailout, and we don't know if he's going to give it to us. My husband and I did used to own a farm here in Nebraska, and thanks to the loss of all the workers, we went bankrupt, and bankruptcies in our state overall are at a record high right now. It's still just so weird to me because we all voted red. Nebraska, every county, every district overwhelmingly voted red, and that seems to have been the reason that we're all out of business now. And that just doesn't make that much sense to me. If you vote for a party, shouldn't they protect you? Shouldn't they pass policies that will help you stay out of bankruptcy? And it's not just the farms, but the whole state is going under because we voted red. When you're a farming family like mine, I can see now that it is important to think before you vote.
Welcome back, fam. Nebraska's agricultural economy, the backbone of the state, has seen a more than 6% GDP drop in the first quarter of 2025. That's tied with Iowa for the steepest decline nationwide. Now, why is this happening? According to the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis, commodity prices are falling, input costs are rising, and interest rates are squeezing producers. That trifecta means fewer profits, more debt, and a shrinking safety net for family farms. You hear it in the voices of local farmers like Bill Landon, who says the interest rates alone are putting everyone into a bind. And you hear it from institutions like the Nebraska Farmers Union, which is sounding the alarm about the worst crisis in decades. But the pain doesn't stop on the farm. This sector is Nebraska's economic engine. When farmers suffer, the towns around them suffer too. Local businesses lose customers. Schools and services lose tax revenue. That's how rural recessions become state-level emergencies. Here's where the political reflection kicks in. Nebraska has, for years, leaned red. It voted overwhelmingly for Donald Trump, not once, but repeatedly. This wasn't just a state nodding toward conservative policies. It was a full embrace of a political project, trade wars, deregulation, and a vision of America first that on paper was supposed to empower the domestic economy, including agriculture. But now those same policies are being pointed to as part of the reason Nebraska is hurting. Take former President Trump's tariff policies. The idea was to bring back leverage in global trade deals, particularly with China. But for farmers who depend on global exports, especially soybeans and corn, those tariffs triggered retaliation and price drops. In the short term, federal subsidies helped some stay afloat, but those subsidies didn't fix the structural damage, and now many of those safety nets are being pulled back. Even Nebraska Republican Congressman Don Bacon, a consistent conservative voice, is acknowledging that these Trump-era policies backfired for his own constituents. That's not political betrayal. That's economic reality finally pushing through the noise. One of the most striking voices came from a Nebraskan responding to the crisis online. They said, "After we all voted red and elected all these people, they're not going to do anything to help us. I'm starting to rethink everything I've been told in my life." That comment struck a chord. Here's someone not looking to score political points, but trying to reconcile their lived experience with their voting decisions. That's not weakness, that's courage. This isn't about left versus right. It's about understanding the systems we live under and being willing to change when those systems fail us. Another angle that's getting attention: federal redistribution of wealth between states. Some red states, Nebraska included, receive more federal money than they contribute. Meanwhile, some blue states, like California, are net contributors to the federal budget. This means tax surpluses from places like California help fund infrastructure, social services, and emergency relief in states like Nebraska. That's not to paint blue states as saviors, but it does challenge the idea that red states are somehow independent or self-sustaining because of conservative fiscal policy. The truth is more complex. It's an interdependent system, and when part of that system is struggling, it's the strength of the other parts that helps hold the country together. This kind of interdependence, whether between states, parties, or people, is something we do well to remember. Now here's where the commentary takes a turn into more structural territory. There's a growing concern, voiced by farmers and commentators alike, that what's happening isn't accidental, that the collapse of family farming in states like Nebraska is part of a broader trend. Hedge funds and large agribusiness interests waiting in the wings, ready to buy up bankrupt farms for pennies on the dollar. We've seen this happen before, in housing and healthcare, even in water rights. Financial institutions identify distressed assets, strip them of local ownership, and consolidate control. The fear now is that rural America may be the next asset class, and farming communities like those in Nebraska are on the front lines. Is it a conspiracy? No, but it might be a market strategy enabled by weak policy and political indifference. At the end of the day, what's happening in Nebraska is more than a local story. It's a reflection of the American experiment, what we prioritize, who we trust, and how we respond when those choices backfire. To the Nebraskans living this crisis, you deserve better than finger-pointing or shame. You deserve leadership that listens, acts, and protects your livelihoods. And to those watching from the outside, be cautious about celebrating someone else's hardship because of how they voted. Thanks for tuning in to Sparkle's Show. Stay thoughtful, stay kind, and let's keep paying attention.